That doesn't matter.
Okay.
Live streaming is on.
Okay, hello everybody. Happy Friday if you're watching this live, or whatever the other day of the week at time. Oops, sorry, that's my email. Any other time of the week or the day or something like that. Welcome to your favorite channel, which is called "Where's Your Fucking Mask, You Idiot." It's not for you; it's for others. You're saving lives, not yours. You can die, but I care more if you can kill other people. So don't be an asshole. Wear your mask. This is your public announcement for the day. And outside of that, hello again. With us is the magnificent, marvelous, incredible, and all of it together, my dear friend Chris Sprouse. How are you, Chris?
I am good.
How's things? How's everything around and in life and in general?
Oh, pretty good. My life hasn't changed that much during the pandemic here. I mean, I always stayed at home all the time and didn't go out of the house much. So yeah, I work at home, so pretty much the same.
Are you overworking? Because many people is telling me that they don't notice it, but by the end of the day, the thing they notice about that has changed with this, confinement at home is that they overwork. They don't realize, they don't know why, but they don't do any purpose. But by the end of the day, it's like, oh, I've worked more than usual.
No, I'm actually finding myself. I think because there's there's less of an option to go out, that I find myself making time to do things at night. Whereas I would just work until I dropped, 3, 4 in the morning. Now I want to stop and go sit with the cats and watch a movie or just relax for a second, because I feel like being shut in, I am doing nothing but working all the time. And I've done this long enough that I know if there's nothing to look forward to, if there's no break, you just go nuts. And for some reason, like from the beginning of the shut-in, I was making sure I stopped working 11 or 12 at night, and which for me is early. That sounds insane for other people, but again, I was regularly working till 3 or 4 in the morning. Just being a night person, it was easier than getting up early.
Do you remember what's the last movie you went to the theater to watch before all this?
Wow. We go to a drive-in movie theater here, and it's usually sort of horror movies and cheesy movies. I think we tried to go see a movie that's on Amazon Prime now called Vast of Night when the pandemic started, but we were turned away. It sold out. I think everybody was. You could socially distance a little more at the drive-in, keep your hands rolled up. But I cannot remember. It's been 3-4 months now, and I'm already forgetting what I did before.
I asked this to everybody because I realized that nobody remembers, even if it was like 3 months ago. It seems like life has changed so much with all this craziness that people are like, I don't remember it, and it was 3 months ago. You think that normally you would remember, but for whatever reason, people doesn't remember the last movie they went to watch.
Oh man, that's sad. I don't remember the last live music concert I went to either. I mean, I posted a photo on Facebook recently, and it was from a year ago yesterday or the day before, and I tried to remember what I've seen since then, and I know I have. I was going about once every month or 2 months to see a show, and it's just gone. It's
Shani's on the chat, and she's saying Knives Out.
Oh, nice. Oh, Knives Out. Yeah, that was. I went to see that with Zan's parents on Christmas Day or New Year's Day, whatever day it came out. I can't remember if it was New Year's or Christmas, but that's when I went to see that. So that's close to being the last movie.
And what is the thing that you miss the most? That they called the door right now to you and Shan, like knock, knock, knock. This is over. You're completely free. Out. What's the first thing you could do?
Either eating at restaurants or going to see concerts. That's what I miss. I think it'll be a long time before anybody does concerts. But restaurants, pretty sure that'll be one of the first things everybody does, and definitely including me.
Mm-hmm. Do you miss conventions? Do you, because I miss conventions, but I don't mean the conventions themselves. Let me explain. What I miss is like I was talking with Howard the first day, and aside of giving the perfect definition of this pandemic, which is like the most boring pandemic ever because you don't have, blood raining from, Howard, rain falling from the clouds, zombies attacking you, etc., etc. It's just boring. It's like, hey, you go out, you die. But he was telling me that he doesn't miss the cons. He miss you guys. He means the people. He misses to be able to sit down and chat about whatever, at whatever time, just for dinner or something like that.
I don't want to offend any fans, but that is all I've ever missed from conventions. Mm-hmm. Because working the convention, a lot of people think, oh, it must be so fun. You're getting out of the house. It's like, yeah, but it's still work. I'm working on my weekend. So what I do miss, though, is it's one of the rare times I see the people I work with, mm-hmm. and we're never together as much as you are at a convention where you have 8 or 9, even more people at once at a dinner, talking about doing the same thing for a living, or just we don't get those water cooler chats and the talking behind the boss's back, at lunch or something like that, or happy hours, after work every Friday. Comic artists don't get that, so that's what I miss about conventions for sure.
Yeah,
I do miss feedback, but what I think what I miss most about the whole business right now is having books out. Just mm-hmm. I'm ridiculously far ahead on the assignment I'm working on now because nothing's been published since March, and it's bizarre not to have anything new to talk about or look forward to on the stands. Just it all just seems a little unsure right now. Like, I don't know when the next book I have is coming out. I think at the end of this month, mm-hmm. but I'm not even sure about that. And I don't think there are too many people that know what they're going to be doing. Comics has always been this way, where you didn't know what you're doing sometimes from one month to the next. You felt really responsible and like you had your stuff together if you knew what you were doing 3 months from now. A year from now is a luxury. But now, most people I know are like, well, I just finished my last job. I don't know what to do. I guess I should do commissions. That's pretty much what a lot of people are doing. Mm-hmm. Even though books are starting to ship again, the material that's shipping was done 3-4 months ago, and I don't know how it's going to impact any cancellations or anything, or their sort of release schedule for the next year. I don't know if that's going to be changed by this whole.
Well, what I talked to the guys at Marvel, etc., is that of course they have to readjust the schedule because of all the time that thing has been stopped. But books that were originally physical, but then they moved them to digital. They announced this week that those books, at least most of them, are going to finally be printed. So it seems that things are slightly, little by little, going back to normal.
That's good. I wasn't aware of that, because what I heard, at the risk of offending other people, comic shop owners in particular, I remember the huge outcry when the company said, well, can we at least print things digitally, or we're going to print things digitally and then go back and print them physically. The comic shops here, at least, went insane. And it's like, I can't figure out whether they think, I've heard both, that no one's reading digital comics, and then that digital comics is going to destroy comic shops. I don't know which is true, but when they said we might keep publishing digitally just to give people something to read or something to collect, or keep revenue coming in to keep artists and writers employed, for instance, and the corporate staff at Marvel and DC employed, the shops seem to go a little nuts, and the companies backed off, and I just thought, ouch, that's tons of people unemployed right there. Tons of people.
No, they actually didn't back out. A lot of books, especially DC, has gone really with digital in the last couple months. Marvel, what they did is that we cannot publish all those books and to be sold at the stores because the stores are closed.
Yeah.
So they decided that some of the books were going to be miniseries or one shots were going to be only digital, and then released physically on a trade. So there was going to be physical, but they announced this week that those books that were supposed to be only digital, because of the pandemic, they are finally going to publish them on paper. But by the other day, when I heard that those complaints from the stores, and I talked to a couple of store owners with all the politeness I could, is, guys, if you don't let them publish digitally and they can publish physically, maybe in 3 days you don't have a publisher. And then when you open the doors, you will complain because you don't have books to sell, which you will have to close the doors.
Yeah.
So let them publish digitally for a while, because that's what it will keep them alive, and it'll keep, as you said, the artists and the writers employed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know anyone who worked without a break. Even though I was just doing cover work, I still had a good month to 2 months where I think either because the Lucasfilm people weren't working and the Marvel editors had to work at home and there was no priority to publish variant cover books, I stopped working for a couple of months, and it was a little scary.
Yeah, absolutely. For a lot of the artists I work with, it was like, this book is on pause.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, this other book is on pause. We don't know if it'll come back. It's on pause, like 3, 4, 5 books, and you're like, whoa.
Yep.
And then, okay, you know what? When they tell you, hey, this book that was on pause, we are going to publish it digitally. At least so it's published, so you can finish the book. For an artist of mine, one of my artists, it was like half of his Star, the miniseries, half of the 4th issue, and the whole issue 5. So it's like, for a while, he thought book stopped on issue 3.5 to say something.
Yeah.
And nothing was going to happen. He had no work. But suddenly they tell you can finish 4 and do 5, we will publish them digitally. Then the artist was like, oh my God, finally.
Yeah.
And I heard the reaction from the retailers, and I honestly got pissed. Because I thought, guys, it's not only about you. It's all about the creators too. It's about the publishers. If we are supposed to have a symbiotic relation, it's about all of us.
Yeah. And if I have to go get another job, I won't have time to draw comics. And there's one more person out of the business, and I don't want that.
Yeah. Why comics for you? Why, aside of the usual answer, I grew up reading comics, I loved comics, blah 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 blah. Why did you start? Why did you finally decide as a professional, comics is what I want to do, and not movie storyboards or design for movies or illustration or any other art related with illustration?
Right. A couple of reasons. Comics were far more direct. Like, even if I wasn't hired by Marvel or DC or Dark Horse or anybody like that, I could still make my own comics. And I did that in college. I did that all through high school with friends. We didn't publish them, but we drew, issue after issue of our own comics, and no interference from anybody. What I drew is what was there, and that's true today. It's very rare these days, knock on wood, that I have to change a lot of what I draw. So it's still incredibly direct. When you hear stories about how long it takes, for instance, a movie to be made, and how when you see storyboards, a lot of times what you see on screen is different. And a lot of times the storyboard's not even seen. And I don't know why, but I like to have my stuff published. I like to have it seen. I like to be able to look at it in a book. And there's something really satisfying about that. But mostly it's that I wanted to draw all the time. I love drawing, and I loved telling stories, even though I don't think I could have described it that way younger. When I was just starting, I just wanted to do something, because I would have gladly gotten into movies, doing any sort of production design or storyboards or something like that. But when I started drawing my own comics for fun, it just clicked with me. It just felt right. It, I think, had a lot to do with the fact that I could control everything. I could determine what happened to characters. I could determine what went where on a page. Just physically control the artwork and the story if I was writing it, and also tell stories that I wanted to tell. I didn't have to worry about something being unsatisfying that I was watching on TV or a comic I was reading that didn't hold my attention. I could do it all myself. So I think storytelling and then drawing, that was it. And comics are perfect for that. They're also small enough that I essentially have to answer to 2, maybe 3 people. Working on Star Wars projects like I am now, it's a little more because there's Lucasfilm involved. So I don't know how many people are over there approving or disapproving of that. Most comics, you're working for your editor, their assistant editor, and then the editor-in-chief of the company. Mm-hmm. That's it. As opposed to, scores and scores of people in movies and even other media like music. And I think maybe writing novels might be the only other profession where you can control things more than you can in comics. I don't think people are telling most novelists they don't like the direction the story's going, or they don't like the character. Maybe they do when they're starting out, but
yeah, well, the editor is famous. The most famous writers have always been really close to their editors because they are like the mirror. They bounce things on the wall, and the wall is that editor who's gonna tell you, hey, careful here or there. So you change the details, but it's part of it, as in comics, I guess.
Well, then maybe comics is even more direct because I don't know what it's like for writers. I'll admit that. I don't know how much editorial back and forth there is with writers. I imagine more than the artists because once the story problems are worked out, then it's just a matter of the artist telling the story clearly enough for everybody to know what's going on. Most editors don't tell people that eye doesn't look right, redraw that. It's usually can you show that from a different angle because it's not clear, or
need more space for the balloons, something like that.
Yeah, not enough room for balloons. What's it? God, took me forever to learn that. Just since I didn't do my own lettering or anything, even on my own comics I did as a kid, I rarely did the lettering. I just drew and filled up the panel. Never thought about that. So I'm still working on that.
That's called horror vacui, and it happens to a lot of artists. You have to feel the space. You don't do like fake lettering even in layouts.
I do when something's complicated in the script or there's a lot of dialogue. Mm-hmm. Even some scripts, at least I can't say he does this all the time, but the Grant Morrison stuff I've worked on rarely had actual dialogue, so there was no ballooning I could do. It was just tell the story and hope. He would say they chat for a minute and then the guy walks in the room, something like that, a basic panel description. So I'd know to leave a little more room for that panel, but it was just sort of hoping that I was leaving enough. That was it. But then, there are other writers where with the dialogue all there, how much to leave. And I'm good at estimating now where I know if somebody's speaking for what looks like a paragraph, then I need to leave a lot of room. But if it's just a little teeny back and forth, I don't need to leave much room at all. And I'm one of the people, I've worked with some letterers who think that they can't cover any part of the figures with word balloons. And I've never had a problem with that. I grew up reading comics where, the whole top of somebody's head would be cut off with a word balloon or something like that. That's fine with me. Just don't cover up anything important. It's happened at least twice with me where I've had a character gesturing with their hand and it's been covered up with a word balloon. It's like, look, I don't do the lettering, but I know there had to be a better place for that. You could fit that in somewhere. Other than
just if you're looking at the panel and the panel has a guy doing this, don't cover it. It's like covering, you have Wolverine's claws in a panel doing like this, and then you cover the claws with and I've seen this, covering the claws with a balloon, and you're like, That's exactly the place where you shouldn't have the balloon.
Yep. There's one I remember. It was Adam Hughes did a Star Trek graphic novel. Had this Romulan villain woman pointing off screen. It was this big dramatic horizontal shot, and she was doing this. And I think it was one of those panels where it was just a figure with no background, and they still put the word balloon over her hand. So it was just, the hand blocked off. She's just her arm going into a word balloon. But I knew she's even talking about what she's pointing at. But they still covered up her hand, and it's like
with all that space.
So yeah, I think it probably would be better for artists to indicate where their own word balloons go, but I don't know why I don't. I've seen several people who do, but I maybe I just feel like that would be controlling someone else's part of the job. Telling somebody else. I don't know.
Okay, but I just remember. But you've worked with the best letterer in the business several times, which is Todd Klein, right?
Yeah, for years. I think I'm not sure if he did. Yeah, he did do Supreme. So there was, 6 months to a year there, and then, the years of ABC Comics. Gosh, we started on that in '97, so almost 10 years of that.
Yeah, so having the best for like 10 years is not a bad thing.
Oh yeah, no. Good letterers are great. Good colorists, even more valuable, because I haven't seen a letter that was so bad I couldn't read the dialogue, but I've seen coloring so bad that I couldn't tell what was going on, or they changed the meaning of the panel, either by making it dull, making it look like everything else, or by obscuring details you needed to see to figure out the story. So I think sometimes it's even more important to have a good colorist than it is a letterer. No offense intended towards letterers at all. I mean, obviously we couldn't read the story without them. And I've had letterers who just did really basic sound effects, for instance, or logos. And then I've had letterers who, like Todd, who did put so much work into figuring out logos and sound effects and incidental lettering, not just the dialogue. And, Todd even went in and figured out a different balloon style for every character in the ABC books, or at least in Tom Strong. I'm sure he did that with the other ABC books too, but I just remember in Tom Strong, actually it's more like every type of character had a different word balloon. Like, I know Newman and King Solomon had specifically different types, but the humans all had the basic oval shaped word balloon.
No, I can't imagine top 10 without that thinking. Top 10 had to be that way, just because there were so many characters so different that shaping the balloons different, helped you follow the book, because I don't think you could follow it, to be honest.
No, gosh, especially what Gene Ha was putting into it, there was so much detail that I think anything that helped the clarity. No offense again to Gene or anything. It was clear to me, but it was just I don't know. Maybe for people who didn't read as many comics, it was nice to have all that to have a little more help.
When you draw, because I've heard really interesting answers to this one. Do you need absolute silence, or it depends on the phase of the work you're doing?
I almost never work in silence. I either have music on, or I'm listening to an audiobook or a podcast. If I don't have headphones on, which is what I usually do, I have a TV and a stereo and stuff here in the studio, and I'll put on live concerts, things like that. I can almost never watch movies anymore because it's too distracting, especially genre movies, because I want to watch them and I find myself looking up too much and watching them. So documentaries or things I've seen a million times are the only things I can have on that are story related. So mostly it's podcast, audiobooks, documentaries, music.
Yeah, I was go please.
What's that?
I said go continue please.
Oh no, that was it. Just
No, I was going to say that it's funny because depending on the artist, I get a completely different answer. But the most fascinating one, I think, was the one that Olivier Coipel gave me, because he was like, when I do layouts, I need absolute silence because I need, to focus on the composition of the page, that everything fits, etc. But then when I move to pencils or inks, since it's more mechanical in a way, I can, I can go with music, etc. And he also said, which was the most fascinating part, depending on the kind of thing I do, I pick the music. Meaning, if I do have to do something epic, I will go, with movie score, Lord of the Rings or Last of the Mohicans or something like that. But if I have to do something emotional, something intimate, I will go with classical music, like French romantic music. So if he adjusts the music, so it enhances in his brain the thing he's doing. So that pushes him in that direction.
No, I perfectly understand that. My problem with it is nothing would last long enough. Like, it takes me longer to draw the page than the Lord of the Rings soundtrack. So, frankly, it'll take me longer to draw the page than probably all 3 Lord of the Rings movies.
Okay. So, also, what's the part of the process that is most boring for you, if there's any, and the more relaxing one, the one that you are like, this is the part. This is why I love to do comics. When you get to that part.
The most boring part for me is probably a really common answer: the backgrounds. I don't know why, but I was always perspective clicked with me. Like the second I figured out how to use perspective, I felt like I could any background whatsoever. I can make up cities. I can draw from photos. It just unlocked being able to draw almost any background. And since I can draw from life and draw from photos, if I'm ever stuck for a background, all I have to do is look out a window at a tree or grab a photo somewhere and use that for reference.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the more mindless parts. That's a bad description. It's not mindless. It's just I think once I have the layout in terms of where everything's going to go in the panel down, the backgrounds are the most mechanical part of the whole process and less interesting to me. The most difficult part of the process, but because it's difficult, it's also the most rewarding when it works, is drawing people.
Mm-hmm.
So drawing figures, drawing faces. That's why I got into comics. Like I love drawing people. I love drawing tech stuff and gadgets, but not just. I wouldn't want to draw, say, like a Transformers comic where it's just robots fighting robots and trucks and planes and helicopters. I definitely want to draw people using these gadgets, people in armor, people in spacesuits and stuff like that is far more interesting to me than just gadgetry. I'd be a technical illustrator if that's what I wanted to do. But comics is generally people's, and that's what I'm going to draw. But the most relaxing part, that's interesting. I think for me, it's when I do the layouts digitally and print them out onto the Bristol board in a light blue. And the most relaxing part of that to me is when I go to do the final pencils over those blue layouts. That's just pure fun. All the thinking, all the heavy thinking is done. All I have to worry about is shading and rendering the final details. But I don't have to worry about where to place anybody or the perspective or any details whatsoever. It's just pure drawing.
Mm-hmm. That's the other part I was going to ask you about. You just said, of course, all of you can see the big drawing board behind him, but you do the only part that of your work that is digital, then is the layouts. What do you use? Cintiq? Do you use an iPad Pro? What's the tool you use?
Yep, I use a Cintiq, and when and this has happened a lot more during the pandemic. I've tried to work out of the studio as much as I can. When I start to go stir crazy, I'll work in the living room or the dining room on a Mobile Studio Pro, which is what I'm talking to you on right now. It's just a small mobile Cintiq, if no one knows. But yeah, I've got it set up here. I'll try to turn my device here. There's the drawing table, and right next to it, like right there, is the Cintiq set up. So it's literally touching my drawing table, so I can switch back and forth pretty quickly if I need to. And yeah, it's just a Cintiq Pro, Cintiq 24 Pro, I think is how they named it. And I do everything from the thumbnails or cover sketches, any small preliminary drawings I do on the Cintiq now, all the way up through. Occasionally I've done final pencils, but I still enjoy doing those in the real world. And in case anybody's wondering why, it's just...
yeah, I was going to ask you why, so just please go.
Yeah, if you have detailed questions, I'll stop.
No. I was just going to ask why the need to continue, penciling on paper. It's because of the feel of the paper. Do you like to feel the weight of the pencil in your hand, the texture? Many people tells me it's because I'm used to it, but I'm like, it's gotta be something more. Because we're creatures of habit, but we can change. But it's gotta be something more on the side of the fact that I'm just used to it.
It's not habit for me because what some people who don't draw don't understand is that drawing on the Cintiq, drawing on a computer, it's the same muscle memory, it's the same movements as drawing in the real world. So it feels the same, except for the slickness of the screen, but you can use a different stylus tip. They make a felt tip stylus, which is what I use, which makes it doesn't feel like a pencil, but it feels like a felt tip marker.
Yeah,
which is what I ink with at conventions and stuff. So it feels like something I'm used to. But I did my last 3 issues of Black Panther in 2018, maybe. And I did those all completely digitally, full pencils. And I just found myself missing drawing on paper with a pencil. I don't know whether it was just, I like the feeling of the art supplies. I do like the feeling of a pencil on real paper, but I think part of it, I don't know how backwards this is or how out of date this is going to be, but it just feels nice to have produced something like, I can literally hold the page. And I don't know, there's something about that, just having a pile of pages stacking up. Or having a physical item that you've made that didn't exist in the morning is kind of nice. And so it's a combination of the feel of it and actually creating something in the real world.
Yeah, that's also the sensation of fulfillment, as you just said. Psychologically, you finish the page on digital and it's in the computer, but it's not real.
Yeah.
But when you finish a page, as you just said, you or Shan or whatever, you just can pick the page and say, fuck, it took me this many hours, but it's done. And again, goes to the stack, and it's done, and the work is there, and it's physical and it's real.
Yeah, that's definitely it. There are a few other things, like there are advantages to digital stuff. Like I can draw smaller, better digitally because you can zoom in. My eyes are only so good. In the real world, if I were drawing small figures, I'd have to use a magnifying glass or something in addition to my glasses. So that's a little bit of a problem the older I get. But there's like line quality and stuff I can't get no matter how much I make my own brushes in the program I use, which is Clip Studio Pro, Clip Studio Paint Pro, I guess. Still, I have more control with a real pencil than I do with a digital pencil because I feel like I'm constantly fighting against that slick feel that you have working on glass, and just sometimes the line is just a little dead and flat on the computer, and I feel like I can give it a little more life in the real world. But it's so minor that I'm sure I'm the only one who notices that.
No, you're not. There's 2 things here. Just so you know, there's a lot of artists who love working digital, but they miss the sensation of the paper. So they created some. Have you heard about Paper-like?
No.
There's like a cover for your iPad. It's called Paper-like that feels exactly like paper, like working on paper. So with the Apple Pencil, who already that good, and the Paper-like, you're working on it, and it feels exactly like you're working on paper.
I wish you could try that though. I wish there were stores where you could try out all these. I'm sure that's an online only thing.
What? I don't know if you can buy it anywhere. You can buy it on the website, but I don't know if you can. Yeah. I think that in the Apple stores they have it.
Oh, okay.
For testing. But
Well,
but by the end of the day, and the other thing that I just remembered is the other day I was talking to John Bogdanov, and he was telling me that he went digital for a while, but suddenly he realized that since you can zoom in so much with the iPad, he was doing the tiniest figures. He was just enlarging and giving them all of the detail. And then, like after the second or third issue he saw on print, he was like, "Why am I doing that? They are like this on the page." So he was, "I need to go back to paper because I'm overworking like crazy just because I can." Since I can zoom in, I am not going to stop. I'm overworking. I'm putting a lot more hours on the pages by the end of the day because I can just make details in the smallest things. It's like it's not gonna matter because people are gonna read it in this size. So all that extra information I'm putting in is not a good idea.
Exactly. And I think everybody goes through that. The way I got around that was not using a pen I call it a pencil, but it's the digital stylus, not using a pen tip size that was too small. So the line was still enormous. If I zoomed in too much, it was this huge fat digitized line. So, that kept me from zooming in too much. But it took me a while to learn that. Like I was putting way too much detail. And I can always tell when I send a page to Carl Story, and when I was working full digital, doing digital pencils, he'd say, "Oh my God, there's so much detail here. This is going to take me forever," or "This did take me forever." Then I know, like, oops, I did that way too long, zoomed in on there. But the other thing, I think Yannick Paquette warned me about this before I started working digitally. He had been working digitally for about a year, I think, when I talked to him about getting a Cintiq, and he said the best and the worst thing about it was the undo button.
Yeah, the Control-C.
Yes. Went down the rabbit hole of undoing, redoing, like checking stuff, or everything you do, you second guess, redo it, and that's true. But it is definitely the best thing about working on comics digitally is that there's always, you can set it so that you can undo or redo however many times you like. So you could make yourself stop doing that by setting it to like 5 times or something. But I have it set it like a huge number of times, like 60 times or something. So I could go back many, steps backwards and get back to something I liked. I do miss that drawing in the real world. Just have to erase and redraw, and that's kind of a pain when I could just hit an undo button and or duplicate something on another layer, keep that old layer around in case I want to go back to it. So there are certain huge advantages of working digitally that you just don't have in working in the real world. But again, no matter how good those things are, or how much I like those, it didn't feel the same. So it was nice to split it up, and I do both. By the time I've spent a day doing layouts digitally, I'm ready to work in the real world.
You're ready to go back. Aside of the fact that, of course, you have one of the best thinkers in the business, Carl.
Definitely.
Why the decision? And I guess I just answered my own question, but why have you kept working with an inker instead of inking yourself?
Carl is amazing. Is reason number one. Reason number two is I have spent so much time just penciling that I don't have many, if any, inking skills. I can ink just enough to do con sketches, when I do commissions, it takes forever to ink them because I'm a little paralyzed with fear and about messing up. That's the one thing about inking.
Mm-hmm.
It's unforgiving. I'm sure I could go to inking digitally because with the undo button, oh,
Yeah.
something just fell over in the background. I don't know. I'm not very good at it. But then there's also this other thing that I've only heard a few people talk about this. I get bored with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I haven't drawn it. I feel like while inking isn't tracing, it's still going over material you've already spent a lot of time working on, and I'm kind of tired of it by the time I get to that point.
Yeah, don't call them tracers. They hate that.
Oh, no, it's more than tracing. I mean, all it takes to figure that out is having a bad inker and a good inker.
Absolutely. It changed everything. And you have, Al was good, but then I said Carl is like one of the 3 best in the industry. We were talking about the influence of coloring and the influence of lettering, but the influence of inking is cannot even be quantified.
Yeah, I'm kind of I don't know what the word. I'm not jaded, but I've worked with Carl so long. I've had such good inking for so long. I don't even think about it anymore. But it used to be before I worked with Carl, and then times when I wouldn't work with Carl, inking was the biggest concern of mine. It was just sort of like, is somebody going to keep what I drew? Or are they going to just eliminate things, move things around, black things out that I drew? Are they going to change the intent of the story that I drew by being lazy or just not able to do what I put down? And the answer is yes. Sometimes that happened, and it was painful.
Yeah, and I remember one time, I won't say with who, but I remember one time when you kept inking the heads yourself because somebody changed them.
Yeah. And that's on this particular book. The main character didn't have many expressions, so they were subtle. And if you changed anything, I felt like the expressions were getting lost.
Yeah, that's I think it was, you showed me, and they were like that. The smallest detail,
yeah,
the smallest line changed the face completely.
And I'll admit, part of that back, maybe if I weren't such a control freak, I wouldn't pencil as tightly probably if I weren't as much of a control freak, but I wouldn't have had such a problem with the inking that isn't faithful to the pencils. And when I say faithful to pencils, they don't need to trace it. Just if you're going to add something, it should be an improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes.
Take stuff away. Don't change things because you think you know better. It's my drawing. It's my style, for better or worse. The mistakes are going to be mine. Let them be. And sometimes those mistakes are they might be mistakes, but it's my style. Like I'm trying to think of somebody like Walter Simonson. Love his work. I mean, no disrespect saying this, but he draws really elongated legs. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine somebody, like if Walter were a new guy starting out, some inker who thought he knew better going, those legs are too long, I'm going to shorten them. And then it wouldn't look like Walter anymore.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And,
absolutely. It's a basic part of his style.
Yeah.
You change that, you change his style, so you are not doing the work properly. That's right. It. What makes comics so unique? And you're one of the people that can answer this question better, I think, because you've worked with 2 of the guys, well, more than 2, but 2 of the guys who are between the most intrinsically comic writers of all time. I mean, they clearly work for comics, and they use all the unique characteristic of comic, which is Alan and Grant. So what's so unique? I keep saying and repeating these past 2 weeks that comics are the only art form who can defy Einstein's, theory of relativity, because we control time and space from the first square of the first panel to the last square or round with shape, whatever, of the last panel. It's all time manipulation, and it's all space manipulation, and only comics can do that, from my point of view. What do you think about that?
No, you're absolutely right. I think the 2 things. It's all about manipulation, apparently, because I was going to say that you control time, but you also control how people read something. Like if you were writing a novel, everyone's going to read that the same way, left to right, up, down, or right to left, depending on the country you're in. It's universal. But with comics, just take that, that one-ish famous issue of Promethea.
Mm-hmm.
You can read it backwards and forwards.
Yes.
So you can control, or whether somebody reads something upside down if you wanted. I can lead you through a panel and make you go whatever direction I want, depending on something as simple as lines in the background, or the way a character's looking, the way their head moves and they're looking off into the next panel or down to a panel below or something like that. You can do that in movies, in film, but I think you're still at the mercy of budget, of what people can physically do, of where you can put a camera. For me, if I want to draw something, that is literally an ant's eye view of somebody's foot, I don't have to worry about CGI and, any of that complicated stuff. Where are we going to find a camera that gives that, the look of an ant's eye or something? I just make that up. I can imagine that. I might reference it, look up some science articles or something like that. But essentially, it's all coming from me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all budget free. It's just how much time I have. That's my only constraint is the deadline. And also, what I'm able to do. There are certain things I just won't be able to pull off drawing wise. I'm not skilled enough yet, or it's something that I think will work but just won't. Like there are certain angles I've tried before that end up just not working. They just either aren't telling the story correctly, or it's just impossible to do. Maybe someday I'll figure that out, but I feel like the only limitation in comics is how quickly they need to be published. If you remove that from the equation, I think what you can do in comics, what you can show, the stories you can tell are limitless. And part of that is, the fact that it's writing and drawing, two art forms that really aren't limited by anything, other than our imagination.
Yeah, but also, as I said, and I just remember, with the exception of maybe Top 10, which was more linear because it was, Hill Street Blues in a way with superheroes. I know I'm going very summarizing it too much because it was a lot more complex than that. But in Tom Strong or in Promethea or in the other books, basically, you guys all the time were manipulating time and space.
We were.
And I mean from the beginning. It was not a thing that you guys decided to do later on. It was, this is the language, we are going to use the language, the advantages of the languages as much as we can, right?
Yeah, and I think, why not? I mean, anybody who thinks comics are just movies, two-dimensional movies, is just wrong. They're not using the art form fully, if that's all they can think of. There's so much more you can do. I mean, I think it'd be boring to have a comic that was just a movie told two-dimensionally. It might as well be a movie. That's the thing. That if you're doing a comic story, it should be something that you can only tell in comics, or that somehow being a comic would improve it or make it more have more impact, or that there'd be something unique about it is more important to me than just walking somebody through a story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a bad job of explaining it. It's just
no. I completely get it. I was going to ask, in terms of that time and space manipulation, how different are Alan and Grant? Because I always thought Alan is a lot more, how can I say it, mathematical in a way, much more calculative, and Grant is more, is crazier on how he plans those things. Is that right? Or by the end of the day, they write the same way?
I don't know I've never seen a full script by Grant. As I said earlier, the scripts I worked on with Grant, there's almost no dialogue. And some of them are almost more like plots. They'll be broken down by page, certainly, and sometimes they'll have individual panels, but a lot of times it'll be like, essentially he'll give me where we start and then where we need to end up, and a few descriptions in between, like this needs to happen, or sometimes he'll get as specific as saying this is a full panel, a full page spread. But usually he leaves a lot of that to the artist, or at least he did in the scripts I worked on. I seem to recall that the Multiversity script I worked on with Grant was far more finished and far more detailed than the Return of Bruce Wayne script I worked on. Which
that's actually the one I have in mind when I ask, because I always think about that one, or Pax Americana, who he did with Frank Whiteley, etc., as Grant being Grant. But Return of Bruce Wayne, I think, is more linear in a way. But Multiversity or Seven Soldiers, this is Grant being Grant in a way.
Yeah, and Alan is definitely more mathematical is a really good way of putting it. He will explain what he's thinking more than Grant. One thing about working with Alan, everybody asks, is it constricting working with somebody who writes that much? No, it's actually freeing. And I know you've heard this because you've done conventions with me, but I never have to wonder what Alan is asking for. Like exactly what he wants, and then it's just my job to make that look good, and I can add things to it, but I know what he wants, and I know my limits. Like, I can't do something totally wild here because that's not the point of this panel. With Grant, I don't always know what he wants specifically, and I keep saying this, but no offense is intended there. Grant scripts are incredibly fun to draw. He's got a really good visual sense. So he'll write things that are really fun to draw. Even if it's, Batman wearing the skin of a giant prehistoric bat is amazingly fun to draw. But he doesn't always give me a lot. He didn't give me a lot to work with in that story, the Batman story, as far as what the characters were thinking or going to be saying. But he does what I think all writers would probably benefit from, all comics would benefit from, and that's the writer. He goes and takes another pass at the script once the artwork is in. He'll go back and sort of respond to what the artist drew, maybe change the dialogue he had in mind. And I think that's the best way to do comics, where everybody's reacting to each other, feeding off each other, and it's a lot more collaborative. I don't know what it's like. Like when I read a Grant Morrison comic that I've drawn, when I read the published comic, I just remember what it was like to work on it. So I don't know if it feels like an Alan Moore comic reading them. I don't know how similar it feels or how different it feels. I just know that it's a different experience to work on it. Sure.
Yeah, that's the part I wanted to get. The finished comic people can read. I don't care about that because they can read it. I don't care about asking you that. I mean, because they can read it, they can see it. It's like many people feels that Grant and Alan, because of the crazy mysticism, blah blah blah, that they are similar, and I know they are not, especially in the way they work with artists. So that's why I wanted to ask about the process itself, not what we see. And also, I think that you can, please correct me if I'm wrong, that one amazing thing they both have that people doesn't know, they have an amazing visual imagination, which helps a lot to an artist, right?
Yes, definitely. If not naming names, I hope nobody can figure out what I'm talking about. And these are minor complaints. I've very, very rarely worked on a book I just didn't like working on. Very rare in 30 years of working in comics. There are some books where it's obvious this guy is a prose writer, or that's their thing, where they've written things where it's all about the dialogue, that it really almost wouldn't matter what I was drawing. And if I were a better artist or more confident artist, maybe I would, like, let's say I had to draw a long meeting scene. I would start it in the meeting room, and then maybe I would cut to, let's say it's an X-Men scene, and they're in a meeting, and the dialogue goes on for 8 pages of this meeting. Maybe I would take it on myself to, halfway through that meeting, have something happening in the danger room, some action sequence with the dialogue taking place in captions over that. I don't know how I'd get that to work, have the action tie into something they were saying, maybe reinforce what they're saying. But there are things like that you can do, but sometimes you are at the mercy of the script. Like, I can't break away from the scene. I have to show all 8 pages of this conference. It doesn't.
Yeah, but that's the difference between a real comics writer, I agree with you, and somebody who isn't, because a real, I'm sorry for the real part, let's put in brackets so nobody gets offended, because it's not about that. What you just said, they're talking about, it's the X-Men. Okay. They're talking about, oh my God, Wolverine just came back from the dead. We don't know what to expect from him. Is he dangerous? Is he fine? Is he gonna kill us? And they're talking about that in the conference room, Xavier, Psychos, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, you as an artist say, I should be showing with captions Wolverine chopping blocks or trees, or just fucking killing robots in the fake sentinels in the danger room or something like that, just to enforce the idea that, hey, we don't know if Wolverine is dangerous or not. So keeping it for 8 pages when you can use, again, the power of comics to tell the 2 stories at the same time, is like that old scene. I remember that was Walter, by the way, in Avengers, when you have caption and Thor wields his hammer, like to throw it away and and maim the villain. What is the panel showing? Thor doing exactly that. So it's like, no, don't tell me the same in the caption that you saw me in the panel.
Right.
So that thing happens with prose writers, as you said, because they don't see they can be in 3 locations and in 3 times at the same time, what you just said. A comic writer that is used to write for comics would use that advantage, as you just said. He could just take you. He wouldn't need you as an artist. He could take you to the other location, keeping the caption. So we are in 2 actions and 2 locations at the same time.
Yeah, and I think if I've always wanted to please the writer, just give him exactly what he's writing for. I feel like sometimes maybe I should have broken out and been a little more, a little bolder. And in the case of that X-Men story you're talking about, if a writer had written that as a conference room scene, I maybe would have done it as 4 or 5 horizontal panels on a page, and every other panel cuts to Wolverine in the danger room, or fighting.
Inserted is the same narrative moving from. Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe I'll do that in the future. But I've actually been so lucky to work with such good writers that for most of the stories I've done, I haven't had to worry about that. It's just I've drawn a couple of stories that seemed really locked into 1 or 2 locations, and just as an artist, it might take somebody 5 minutes to read a comic book, maybe that long, and it might take a writer 2 days or a week to write the script. That's a month for me that I have to spend drawing the same thing, the same backgrounds over and over and over. And it'd be nice, I think, if sometimes writers were cognizant of that. If they thought, oh, you know what, let's put in a fun scene to break up this heavy dialogue stuff, just so the artist doesn't fall asleep or get too bored, because that'll show. When you're bored with what you're doing in comics, I think it becomes obvious. You start taking shortcuts, leaving out backgrounds, whatever.
Yeah, and then we go back to the one of my other pet peeves, which is that the writers who don't care, or they literally just don't write for the artist. Of course, we understand the machine, as I said. Sometimes you don't know who the artist is because a monthly book. So okay, you just write, and then, as you said with Grant or others, but Grant is a special case. But with others, they adapt and they change the dialogue and they move things because, okay, now I have the art. It's a different. Some things have changed, etc. But there's artists that literally don't write for the artist. They just write what they write. And
Right.
it's so obvious to say when an artist is not involved. It's absolutely obvious. And you just see it on the page. You just see it like you have to do work. You go from beginning to end, page 1 to page 20, you're done. But if the writer gets you involved, the symbiotic relationship it creates, it changes comics completely. You can see it in the strength of the pages.
Yeah, going back to talking about Alan, when I started on Supreme, the scripts, actually all of the scripts I did for Supreme, Alan had written them months before I was ever hired, and they were for another artist. So he didn't know who was going to be drawing it, but it didn't matter. He still wrote visually amazing things in there because that's what he wanted to write. You know, he writes. I think he knows he's writing comics, so he's writing interesting visual scenes, and visual moments. And I don't think he cared about whether he got a good artist or not. It was just that's what he wanted to write, and he wrote it. And it was definitely better working on Tom Strong, where there was contact with Alan, than just working on scripts he had written a year ago. But still, you know, the scripts he wrote a year ago were just full of really nice moments. If there were one of those, I remember, I don't know why this one sticks out, probably because it was difficult to draw and rewarding when it was done because it worked. And there's a scene where Supreme and his sister are walking through, I can't remember what they called it. What Supreme's Fortress of Solitude. I don't remember what it was called.
I don't even remember.
A long time ago now. Anyway, they're walking from the upper deck outside all the way to, I don't know, the basement trophy room or something. So it's one of those things only comics can do or do well, and that's a cross section. It was a cross section of this entire thing. The Citadel, I think, is what it was called. And every panel, they're walking down a spiral stairway that goes through the middle of this thing. And every panel, they're in a different location on a different level. And, you know, I can imagine that being done really badly. And I don't know, I think I did it at least competently, but I remember it being really difficult to figure out because it's like, do I do realistic perspective or do I do a different perspective for every single panel? You know, it became a logistical, practical nightmare, but I think it worked pretty well when it was done. And it's one of those things where some writers might have saved that for like, oh, I'm going to be working with Frank quietly. I can write one of those things. And I know he's going to do a good job. But if I'm writing that for somebody I don't know, some new guy just starting out, they might shy away from writing something that complicated.
But at the same time, that was like your training wheels. I mean, and for Alan, I guess it was also good because he saw what you did on Supreme. So, okay, I know how I can throw this shit at him in Tom Strong because he knows how to do it. So that was like amazing training for you both to work together, right?
It was. And yeah, he learned about me. And what happened when we started the ABC stuff is I'm pretty sure he interviewed all of us and asked us what we wanted to draw and what we liked drawing and just really picked our brains, and it all came out in the books. And I thought that was genius. Like, why would I want to work on a book with an artist who doesn't enjoy what he's drawing? You know,
there you go.
I could stack the deck and make it all things he wants to draw. You know, that was a genius thing on his part, I think.
Okay, let me see. Okay, people, we are not ignoring you. Let's go with the questions. Is you okay with it? So people doesn't think I am just ignoring them. I'm sorry, guys. Angel Perez. Mr. Prowse, how was working with Jason Aaron in Thor's? Could you choose the versions of the Ghost of Thunder theme and the composition as a procedural thriller in the narrative?
Yes. I could definitely choose the composition, and there was a lot of leeway in Jason's descriptions for me to choose angles and things like that. But as far as the costumes go, if I understand the question correctly, what happened was Marvel gave me a PDF that was a list of every Thor we could choose from, and almost all of them had a picture associated, and it was most of the photos were fairly small, so I had to do my own research. I did a lot of research on Thors, and most of it was, just filling up folders on my computer with pictures of old Thors, and that wasn't as much of a problem as trying to fit them all in, give everybody equal time. And, to this day, there are people that say, "I wish you had done more with this guy." Sorry, we did hundreds of Thors,
Like it was like the hundreds you did weren't enough. Chris notes as Chris and you asked me, no, ask him. Chris and loves the comic. I am wondering whether it's still advisable for aspiring comic artists to pursue a career in comics today. Comics are the most difficult and time-consuming way to make money for a character artist. Is it lucrative enough? This is a long one. Through royalties to be able to live on it on the long term and also support a family? That's it.
Speaking personally, I couldn't support a family on what I make, but I'm married to a woman who has her own career, so we're a two-income family. I don't have any children either, so I imagine it's difficult, but I don't know for sure. I will say, if you are worried about making a lot of money, you probably shouldn't get into comics, because it's really rare, and it's getting rarer, that things make enough royalties for you to think that that's going to be a huge bonus paycheck. The most royalties I ever made were only ever enough to put a down payment on a used car. A relatively recent used car, but I just never made huge amounts of royalties. And if I had hoped that I was going to strike it rich doing comics, I would have been sorely disappointed. That wasn't the motivation to get into comics. And I will say, I don't know if I'm quite answering your question, but if you want to get into comics for the money, that's the wrong reason, because there's no way it is worth the time and effort you have to put into it. If you don't love doing comics, stay away.
Yeah, I think that's the only answer, Chris, because you're asking me too. If you're thinking about the money, don't do comics.
Yeah,
this is not, you do comics because you love them.
Yeah, it's a job, and I make money.
Yeah,
but here's an example. I was not able to even consider buying a house until I was 50. So this is not like, let's start a family and go buy a house and I'm going to get that job in comics and, things will be great. It's like, it might be a struggle. Not everybody's going to be, Jim Lee, who, even Jim Lee probably worked for 5 or 6 years, not making a lot of money before.
No, more. I think even more, because he started, inking Wheels, then he did, Alpha Flight and all that stuff until he broke on X-Men, because even before he was doing Punisher, who was a good seller, but he was Punisher. I think until he did X-Men, he didn't, explode. And that was like maybe already 6, 7, 8 years in his career.
Yeah. And what people don't realize is it's not like Jim Lee did one issue of X-Men and became, superstar overnight. He worked on that book for like 3 years.
Yeah, I think so. 2 or 3 years on Uncanny. And then, the thing exploded with the speculation, whatever, X-Men 1 and all that. But he had been working in comics before, doing Punisher, inking Wiles and other stuff. He started inking, in fact.
I don't remember that. I do remember, I think the Punisher was the first place I ever saw him.
I think he was inking Wiles on Alpha Flight.
Wow.
Or something like that. They shared in a studio. But anyway, that he had a long career before he exploded. People remember, I always say, people remember Adam Hughes on JLA. It's like, well, he didn't start on JLA. Before that, he was doing Mace Agency for Comico and all that. So people doesn't just show up.
And don't get rich overnight in comics, especially. But yeah, it's not a substitute for winning the lottery by any means.
Exactly. Love from Howard says, by the way, did you turn off any lights, Chris? Because you're darker.
It's starting to storm here. We're getting a bad storm, so
okay.
I just have
It's fine.
I can put on some lights if you want.
Nah, it's fine. Just look at your screen and you'll see, you're a bit darker now, but it's fine.
Yeah.
I think people can see you anyway. Log from Howard. Did you decide to not continue in Tom Strong after Alan left the book? And in the later miniseries, when you did come back, did you miss him?
Oh, I missed working with Alan, but I thought Peter Hogan was good at writing the characters to the point where they were the characters. Like I never felt like they were Peter's version of Tom Strong and his family. They were so real to me and to Peter, I think, that we were just telling the next story in the characters' lives. I definitely did not decide to not do Tom Strong. I wanted to draw Tom Strong for the rest of my career. I would have been happy if that's all I ever did, until I retired or died or whatever. But Alan retired, and I think he thought he ended the series, all of the ABC series, quite finally. But I guess they found a way to bring everybody back, and I'm kind of glad they are. I hope it didn't. I know it didn't offend Alan that much, because we actually, Peter actually talked to Alan and got his blessing on doing the miniseries, and so he wasn't upset about it. I just think that, as far as he was concerned, the stories were over. He had told the stories he wanted to tell. But I did not want it to end. It was very sad. I remember I drew the last page of the last issue of Tom Strong, issue 36, on New Year's Eve of, I don't know, like 2005 or 6, something like that. And I was just depressed, really sad. I did not want this to end. And couldn't have been happier when I got a call from my editor, Ben Abernathy, saying that they were thinking of starting a new Tom Strong series, and for some reason he didn't think I'd want to draw it. So he said, "Would you want to do covers or something?" And I was like, "What? Covers?" It's like, why haven't you considered me to draw this? Like, what? Why would you ask anybody else? Like, I'm still alive.
Because they thought that if Alan, knowing them, they thought that if Alan finished the book, it was also you saying it's the end, and you wouldn't want to come back.
Yeah, I hope no one saw it as like a slap in Alan's face or anything. As I said, we had his blessing for the 2 miniseries. I'm not sure what he thought of them, if he liked them or not, but
knowing Alan, I think he didn't read them at all.
No, but I really wanted to visit those characters again. I was overjoyed, and I probably worked harder on those 2 miniseries than just about anything I've drawn in my career, just because I knew how much I missed them, and that this was not going to go on forever. So I really, really wanted to do a good job on what might have been my last chance to draw these characters.
Why don't you write them? Why don't you go back to tell DC, I want to do Tom Strong myself as a writer and artist? Because I know you could.
I really don't want to write.
Okay, but I know you could.
I can write. I hate writing so much. It's painful. And as painful as it is for me, there are other guys who can do it better and more easily, and have it figured out. I'd have to learn everything, like starting now, and I'd rather just put that energy into drawing.
That's a good point. Maybe you could plot it. Just create the story and plot it for somebody else to script it.
Every few years, I know Peter used to, I don't know if he still does, used to run it by DC. Like, hey, can we do another Tom Strong miniseries? And they keep shooting us down. But
but there's a thing now. There's Black Label.
Yeah, I'd do it in a second. All they have to do is let me know. Right now I'm under an exclusive Marvel contract, but I try to figure something out.
Oh, you can do that amazing thing, which is, yes, I signed the renewal, but I need 6 months between contracts just to do Tom Strong.
Yeah, they do actually offer.
And if you say Tom Strong, I don't think anybody at Marvel, especially in CB as we know him, is going to say no, you can't. It's Tom Strong. He's your baby.
And especially, I could even keep doing what I'm doing right now, which is just a cover assignment while doing Tom Strong.
There you go. Okay, we gotta talk to Mark Doyle. Let me see. Next one. How did working with Alan Moore and Tom Strong become a reality? How did it feel to get it, and how many pages have more scripts? That the same question as always. How did you get to work with Alan Moore? How did you get to work in Tom Strong, and how many pages the script had? That question that you only answered, let me count, 6 million times.
Okay, I quit DC Comics. I didn't quit DC Comics. I started working on other projects. I was working exclusively for DC, and when my contract ran out, I got offered work by, I think, like Dark Horse and Valiant at the time. I did a couple of projects there. For Dark Horse, I wanted to draw a Star Wars comic. I love Star Wars, so I was able to do that. And then I got offered some Youngblood books by Rob Liefeld, and I was like, I'm not a fan of the series, but I need to work, so sure, I'll do them. And they actually turned out to not. They turned out to be fun. I enjoyed the writer I worked with was Eric Stevenson, who's now president of Image. I don't know what his title is, but he's basically running the whole show.
Yeah.
I liked his writing. I worked on a couple of books with him, and whoever was drawing Supreme, I don't remember, had quit, and they needed somebody, and Eric was familiar with me. He was editing Supreme. So he said, hey, we need an artist for issue 50. Would you like to draw it? And I thought about it, and I just thought, since I'd been reading Supreme and I was a fan of Alan's, he was sort of commenting on how the 90s comic art style was different than 60s and 50s and earlier styles. And I just thought, my style looks far more like the 50s and 60s and not like Image Comics, so I wouldn't be good for it. So I turned it down at first. And then maybe for 2 days. And then I thought, what am I doing? With Alan Moore, on an Alan Moore story. But it was only supposed to be one issue. I drew the one issue, and they still hadn't found an artist, so they asked if I wanted to keep going. And I did. Worked on that for 6 months until Rob went out of business, and then sat doing nothing for a little while, waiting, hoping, trying to get work. And then I got a call from Alan saying he was going to pitch some series to major companies and wanted to know if I was interested. And I definitely was. He had, I think at that time, he just had the character names in mind. He told me the names of the different characters: Tom Strong, Promethea, Gray Shirt, and went away for a while. And then he came back with a proposal, which was basically probably 1 to 5 pages describing every one of the ABC series that he was going to send around to all the companies. I know he sent it to Dark Horse and Image Comics. I don't know if it was just to Wildstorm or if he sent it to any of the other Image guys, but it was an amazing proposal, and I already wanted to work on it. He asked me to work on it, so of course I'm going to say yes. But once I read the proposal, it was just amazing stuff. And I mentioned this earlier, but he had sort of picked all of the artists he had in mind. He picked our brains and figured out what we wanted to draw and what we'd be good at. So even as early as the proposal, it was all there. And I just knew it was going to be amazing. Definitely something I wanted to do. So once he found somebody to bite, which was, I guess, Jim Lee, somebody at Wildstorm. I don't know if it was Scott Doombeer or Jim Lee, who it was that acted on it. But, once somebody grabbed up the ABC books, I mean, it was probably, well, not even probably, it was definitely the best time of my career. So you asked how it felt. It's like it was so much fun. It was so exciting. It felt like the way they describe '60s Marvel Comics bullpen. It was like we were sharing artwork with each other and reading all the scripts for all the books. At least I know I did. I got the first issue script for all the books, which, to answer your other question, were enormous. I think the first issue of Tom Strong is 36 pages printed. The script, easily double that, possibly triple. The first panel of the first page was one entire single-spaced page of typing with virtually no margins. Like, it filled up from top to bottom the entire page just to describe one panel, and all that panel was showing was a door.
Yeah, the famous door.
Yeah. So yeah, the scripts were incredibly large, incredibly long, and incredibly detailed, but just, I know for me at least, every time and this is how long ago it was, the scripts came in the mail in a big envelope, with Wildstorm printed on it, so I knew what it was. And man, I'd set aside a day to read the script, and it was amazing. But yeah, the whole thing, everything about ABC until it started to end was great.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody was enjoying themselves. Everybody I know was pretty proud of the work. And couldn't have asked for more.
Mm-hmm.
Except for it to go on longer, obviously. But.
David Rubio Matallanes is asking if you still keep those scripts.
Yes, I have. Probably, I'm looking at them now. I have it's probably 4 feet of shelving. They're all in notebooks about this thick.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about 6 issues of scripts in each of those. And so I have everything from Supreme to little things I worked on with Alan. Like, there was a Judgment Day miniseries where I got the entire script, which I kept, but I only worked on like 6 pages or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've kept everything.
Mm-hmm. Chris North asks, how did you learn and master your craft, anatomy, storytelling, etc.?
Practice. Just I've been drawing since I can remember. Since probably every kid draws, I know, but I never stopped, and it's all I did. I didn't play sports. I didn't work on cars. I didn't do all the things that most American kids and teenagers do. I just drew. I sat in my room and drew, and I drew my own comics and learned by trial and error, just year after year. And I didn't start noticing that I had any sort of ability at it till I was about 14. So that's a long time to go, just being really bad at something but really wanting to do it. But around age 14, it was like, hey, that actually kind of looks like it could be a Marvel comic or something. Like it actually looks like a figure, there. It's not just some crappy kid's drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And I still draw all the time, every day. So it's just practice, reinforcing, the whatever natural talent I might have had has been reinforced by 50 years of practice drawing every single day. And I think that's the best way to improve.
Yep. And as I said to young artists, what do I do to get better? Just keep drawing nonstop, every day, every hour you can, draw. That's the only way.
Carry a sketchbook with you where draw from life in your sketchbook. But just draw all the time. That's the best way to do it.
Yep. Angel Perez asks, what's your opinion about the use of the ABC characters such as Promethea or Tom Strong in DC Comics as part of their universe? Do you like the version of Tom Strong by Jeff Lemire in Terrifics?
I avoided it because I knew it would cause me not necessarily anger. I'd be angry if it was done badly, but it's Jeff Lemire, so it probably wasn't done badly. He's a good writer. I just knew it would bother me that I wasn't involved, that they were doing things that I know Alan never wanted to have happen with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
They were specifically not supposed to be in the DC universe. And no matter how they figured, I have an idea of, just in reading what little I did read about those stories, I know that there was some sort of interdimensional crossover thing. So they weren't suddenly retconned into being in the DC universe all this time. So at least they tried, but I don't know. I stayed away because I knew it would be emotionally difficult. So I don't know is the actual short answer to the question. I don't know if they were good or bad because I tried to spare myself some of the heartache. Seeing people do something with characters that were so real to me that I wouldn't have done necessarily. They might have done exactly what I would have done, but chances are they didn't.
Yeah, why suffer? Why suffer? Why having a bad time with something that you knew shouldn't happen?
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, that wasn't the real Tom Strong. If it's not,
there you go.
If it's not in the ABC universe in Millennium City, then that's not the real Tom Strong. That's
by the end of the day, that's the conclusion. That's not the real Tom Strong for you. So get out of it. Pedro Mercader, hello everyone. How was it working on such, like choral project like Global Frequency? Were there some guidelines between all the artists, or the treatment was like they were all independent issues from each other?
Independent. All I ever saw from Global Frequency, I don't know how much was done before I did my issue. My issue was like number 12.
I think so, yeah.
Pretty far in, and I still only saw Gary Leach's character designs. That's all I had as reference. Character designs and the logo design that they had, had to put on everything. So it was done completely independently of anything else that was being done on the series. My first time seeing it was when, seeing most of it anyways, when I got the trade paperback.
Felipe Gonzalez asks, how did you get involved with Warren Ellis in Ocean? It was excellent artwork with a great quality.
I was sitting around, towards the end of Tom Strong, I'd say 2004. I think it finally ended in 2006 or 7, but in 2004, there were several writers who wanted to write Tom Strong stories. And they were big names in not just comics, but in science fiction novels. And there was one particular writer, and we all should have known better based on his reputation, but they had me wait. Like, oh, he wants to work with you, specifically on a Tom Strong story. And he's working on the script now and will be in any time. So
anytime. Oh,
you're free for that by having somebody else come in and do Tom Strong for a while, which was painful. Like it was another reason I decided not to look at the Jeff Lemire stuff was because I knew what it felt like to watch other people doing this book. It was difficult. And so I'm sitting there not working on Tom Strong for months because this writer never turned in anything. And so I begged my editor to say, please give me something. Is there anything I can do? If you're not going to have me do Tom Strong stuff, which seems ridiculous, give me something. And Warren had turned in the proposal for Ocean, and he said, how about this thing? And I loved it. I had always wanted to do a straight science fiction comic, and this was right there. That's what it was. So it was it probably took a year to do. So I was gone from Tom Strong even longer than I wanted to be, but I don't regret doing Ocean at all. I mean, it was a dream in terms of, I wanted to do a hard sci-fi book, and I got to do it. It did okay. Sales-wise, it was optioned for a movie, so I wouldn't say it was a huge success, but it didn't embarrass us. I think we did a fine job, and I'm proud of it. So,
did you guys own it, or is it deceased?
It was I don't know if I'm even legally allowed to talk about it. Probably not.
Okay, so let's.
But yeah, it was more like DC licensed the right to publish it. But we owned it.
Okay. David Cabezas, how is it to be working on Star Wars? Is it difficult for you to portray the actors and keep them consistent?
Yes, but it's sort of that would be like saying when you drive, is it hard to keep the car in between the lines? It's like, well, that's the whole. That's what driving is. It's like that's what these assignments are, because these might be movie likenesses, but when I'm drawing Tom Strong, for instance, I'm trying to make him look like the same guy from panel to panel, from issue to issue. So it's the same process. It's just I have to be way more specific. The good news with Star Wars is it's so photographically documented that if I've ever stuck, like what does Harrison Ford look like from what's the back of his hair look like? Oh, there's a photo of it. But so in some respects, it's easier than making it all up out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But working on Star Wars is another dream come true. I think I decided to actually go into comics for a living because of Star Wars. When I saw the movie when I was 11 years old, that's when it was released, and completely changed my life. I had been drawing my own comics, but it would just be sort of, I'm going to draw a Hulk comic today. Star Wars made me want to do more science fiction comics, and it sort of opened my mind to like, creating an entire world on my own. Like I don't have to just draw Batman, Superman. I can, come up with my own stories and do my own thing, which sounds weird now that I'm hesitating because I'm realizing what I'm doing now is just drawing Star Wars. I'm working on somebody else's world, but it started my imagination firing. It made me want to create my own stories, and I couldn't make movies as an 11-year-old, but I could draw. So I went in, and I don't think I've ever told Howard Chaykin this, but I think he'd be the first to admit that his adaptation does not look like the movie. Like
yes, he will.
The movie and some
he will.
So as a little kid who didn't know any better, I was like, I'm gonna do a Star Wars adaptation that looks like the movie. The ships look right and the people look right. And I'm 11, I couldn't draw, so it didn't. But that was my goal, and I started drawing adaptations of Star Wars on my own. And so it sort of fired me up in a way that it's hard to explain, but it somehow made me want to do more comics and to do comics for a living. Like I knew, like I just want to do this. I want to draw aliens and spaceships and design backgrounds and tell interesting stories. And it sort of changed the direction of my young life. I became all about Star Wars for a long time. So to actually get to draw in 95, 96, I worked on a Star Wars miniseries for the first time. And that was amazing for a lot of reasons. But
the first one was Splinter of the Magazine.
Written and inked by Terry Austin, which was another amazing thing. Growing up in the 80s, 70s and 80s, reading Byrne X-Men stuff and Walter Simonson and X-Men, X-Men Teen Titans with Terry. It was amazing getting to work with him. But it was early enough in my career and long enough ago that I always wanted to come back and do more Star Wars stuff because I thought I could do it much better now. Mm-hmm. And hopefully I am. So my goal is is more like, thank God I'm working on Star Wars again. I can do it better now.
Mm-hmm. Your wife says you doing a Transformers book would be so badass.
I don't know. It's like having seen all the new movies. It's like this makes me sound so old, but as I'm watching them, I'm like, I can't figure out what their bodies are made of. Like I wouldn't know where to start drawing them. Because if I had to draw them the way they look now in the movies, I wouldn't quite know where to start. It just looks like a bunch of junk, like a bunch of stuff all over the place.
I think that if you do that in comics, it has to look like they did in the 80s Marvel comics. Like go back to them looking like cars.
I think so.
If you try to go, too detailed like they do in the movies, I'm like, that doesn't look like cars. It doesn't look like a car that transforms into a robot. It's something different. It's that transformation doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it just looks like a bunch of model parts.
Yeah,
glued to something. A digital version of gluing model parts that make no sense. But I don't know. I don't know if I'd enjoy a Transformers thing. Sorry,
Chad, he doesn't see it. Stop insisting. Love from Howard says, did you contribute ideas of any of the worlds where the adventures of Tom Strong took place, who chose those well-known authors who wrote the backup stories in Tom Strong?
The first part of the question, I already mentioned that Alan picked our brains, the artist's brains for the ABC books. So I felt like I did sort of contribute because of the things that I told him I was interested in drawing. He worked into the book, and I mean everything. From he'd ask what comics I read as a child, and so I said Tintin, and we have Timmy Turbo, who's very much a Tintin character. Him and his little gang of his little kid gang. I remember about halfway through the series, I got a call from Alan, and he said that he had just finished reading through the Lee Kirby Fantastic Four issues, and I had just done that too. And so he said, I feel like we could do this in Tom Strong, this family vibe, this focusing on the characters in their headquarters building, and tell more science fiction oriented stories and less pulpy stories. And for a while we did that, and I feel like I don't know if I contributed ideas so much as the fact that I had just read through the first 50 or 80 or whatever the Kirby Lee Fantastic Fours. Just I knew what he was going for, so it's like I was a willing partner and jumped on and was able to do that. But
in a way you did, because the moment you tell him, I just did that too, I just read that too, when he actually writes it, he's thinking he knows what I'm going to talk about, because he read it too. So he's writing for you to make it, to make it a reality. So of course you contribute because you put it in his head. Yes, if you said, nah, I don't like it, I'm not reading it, he would probably have, thought about it in a different way.
Yeah. He did ask, that same phone call, he asked if there were any characters I wanted to draw more than I have been, and I said Tesla. And for a while, we lots of Tesla stories. So that's the kind of way I'd contribute to that. Having already contributed so much in telling him, like, I wanted to draw science fiction, I wanted to draw, I was, at the time, I was missing drawing superhero action kind of books. Just what made superhero comics fun for me were all of the weird stuff, talking apes and robots and spaceships and gadgets and stuff like that were always fun for me. So that's all in Tom Strong in spades. And I'm pretty sure all of the Ingrid Weiss stuff was Alan, but I think maybe I'd say any influence I had other than the initial influence of this is what I want to draw, this is how I draw, was about halfway through when it turned to be more family-oriented Tesla stories, or things where the whole family went on adventures together. That was definitely after a phone call with me. But the thing is, with Tom Strong, I didn't need that. Like, I was happy to draw what Alan wrote. It's Alan Moore, It didn't need me, I didn't write comics. I can focus on what I'm good at and take these stories that were perfect for me anyway. They were written with me in mind, and I'd be perfectly happy to just write what he drew. But Alan wanted to collaborate, so he would do this. He'd call up and say, "What do you feel like?" or "How have you liked what we've been doing? Anything we should work on?" As far as the other artists, mostly Alan, but I'd say a bigger influence than me for sure was Scott Doonbeer, the editor, picking people he knew. He has amazing contacts in the world of comics, so he was able to get people that I don't know if Alan knew, like Arthur Adams and Howard Chaykin, things like that, people like that. I remember asking for artists, and most of these guys ended up working on the Tesla one-shot we did. So the people I'm almost certain I requested, I said I'd love to see what Howard Chaykin would do. And now that he hears that, he's probably going to be mad because he says he hated working on that. But I said I really wanted, I would love to see Garcia Lopez, Michael Golden, and the Gaijin Studios guys do Tom Strong work, and all of them were in the Tesla Strong one shot we did towards the end. But you can probably tell who had more of an influence with some of the artists picked. It was people Alan had worked with before, like Dave Gibbons. Oh gosh, so many. I mean, from issue 3 onwards, I think we had the 6-issue short stories. But yeah, it was mostly Alan and Scott, but a few of them were people I suggested.
Chris Knowles just said, Chris just found your YouTube videos. Will you continue doing them?
Yes. The problem with those is I'm working on stuff that I'm not legally allowed to show before it's published. So I could film myself drawing a Star Wars cover. I just wouldn't be able to show it for God knows how. Like, here's how the 7th or 8th Star Wars cover I drew just came out. I'm on the 26th. So it'll be sometime next year before you would even be able to see the video for what I'm working on today. So what I'm doing is I'm filming commissions I'm working on while the covers are in limbo as they're getting approved by Lucasfilm. That usually takes a week to 2 weeks. Like I'll do a cover sketch. I do them in series of 3. I do 3 cover sketches. They get sent to my editors, and then they send them to Lucasfilm, and I hear back, a week to 2 weeks later. And oftentimes I will finish the covers I was working on while doing those sketches and have some downtime. So I've been doing a few commissions. Those are what I'm filming. And I haven't had time to do that lately because we started back up again doing covers after a little bit of a hiatus.
Felipe Gonzalez says, how did you start working at Marvel? What projects are you going to do in the future with them?
No idea. I'm hoping at this point I'd like to start doing interiors again. It's been a long time since I've done any. But my main goal now is once I finish the Empire Strikes Back variant covers, I'd love to do Return of the Jedi theme covers. If they're going to keep doing the variants, which, I guess, for my sake, I'm glad people are still buying them. I don't understand why people are still buying variants, but okay, if you're going to, I'd love to keep drawing these Star Wars variants. So I'd love to do Return of the Jedi, any of that other stuff, just because it's fun. And another reason, it's not just me getting off on drawing Star Wars stuff. One of my weak spots in my career was always doing covers. I always thought I was really bad at covers. So now I've done 26 covers in a row. I'm getting better at it. It's practice. I'm having to come up with an interesting image, 3 times a month, as opposed to once in a while. I hardly ever did covers before, so I don't think I ever progressed very far. I never got better at it as fast as I wanted to. But now I feel like I'm getting a little better at it. So I'm learning something there. But I'd like to keep doing Star Wars covers. I'd like to do some stories. Love to do Fantastic Four and more Spider-Man stuff. I finally got to do a Spider-Man story, and this seems to always happen. It was a fun story, but I want to draw Spider-Man, and what I get is Peter Parker turning into a werewolf. So it's like a ripped Spider-Man mask and stuff like that. And as much fun as that was, I'm still all right. I still want to draw Spider-Man. The real Spider-Man someday.
Yeah, that was like Gary Frank was telling me 3 weeks ago. You know what? I've never been able. People remembers me as an artist on the Hulk. Like, I've never been able to draw the Hulk I wanted since I was a kid. Like, what do you mean? Like, I always drew a smart Hulk, etc. And I just wanted to draw Hulk. Hulk breaking things. Like the crazy classic Hulk.
Yeah.
And it was like, people doesn't realize I never ever drew that Hulk. Never.
Yeah. No, there are tons of characters. Like, I've only drawn Wonder Woman twice. Once it was one panel in Action Comics, and then I did a 16-page story, I think. I don't know. I've rarely drawn the big DC people. I've drawn a lot of Batman, and I've drawn Superman short stories, but he was barely in them.
Yeah.
There was at least one story, if not more, 2, where there was no Superman in the story. So it's kind of like, I really like a chance to do a Superman story at some point too. And
it's a natural fit. You do Superman, you did of course Tom Strong. Superman is just a natural fit in your career, let's say. But you know who you just mentioned, so a group that I've always thought you could be most amazing with, which is the Fantastic Four. I would love to see a Fantastic Four. But above that, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I've been thinking it for years. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it to you, but I would love to see you a She-Hulk series.
a what series?
She-Hulk.
It's funny.
She-Hulk as John Byrne did him. I mean, like more crossing the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Fun. Not the original She-Hulk used to be like the Hulk, but
Yeah.
That funnier, closer to reality She-Hulk.
No, I'm just trying to remember if I'm sure I've done a con sketch, but I don't think I've ever drawn the character.
I'd love to see you do it in a book. Doing a series of with She-Hulk. I think it would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I want to work, so I'll do anything. But I would love to do more. I'd always love to do a creator-owned thing, but if that's not available, then I'd like to play with a lot of the characters that I grew up reading or that just look like a lot of fun to do, and that would be. There are certain characters I thought I would never care about doing, like Thor. I didn't have much of a connection to that. I love the Walter Simonson comics, and I loved some of the Kirby stuff, but it never felt like anything I wanted to draw until I drew it, and then I loved working on Thor's.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever answered that question for that guy who asked about working with Jason Aaron. Amazing stuff. Love the whole concept of the police procedural Thor's thing. Just absolutely loved it. And just enjoyed drawing the Thor's. The whole Thor mythology thing was way more fun than I thought it would be. So I'm always surprised. There's certain characters, like, for instance, I thought, we'll see how this goes. I've never really drawn a lot of Green Lantern, but I also have never really cared about the character. Having said that, I could see it being fun because it's essentially a space series, outer space series. So I get to draw aliens and all that stuff, science fiction stuff I want to draw. So I can see that being fun. There's really not much that I would say no to as far as certain characters. There's nobody that I think I would hate drawing.
I love from how it says in Spanish. David, it was Chris who did that page of the door that you mentioned some time ago. Yes, he just explained it, the door in Tom Strong. Okay. You don't know, blah, 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 blah. Next. Shan says, you will understand probably. Tony Flicks, I love guys in suits talking.
Oh, yeah. That's... I feel like I've drawn way more than my share of guys in suits talking in comics, and that gets boring. It's one thing to be good at it. It's like I can draw guys in suits because I can look at photos of guys in suits and draw that. But it's not interesting, and it's hard to make it look interesting. It's not interesting to draw, but then it's hard to make it look good on the page too. And if you do a certain amount of that, it's just mind-numbing. It's like, imagine drawing a Madman comic, a Mad Men comic. I'm sorry. It would just be kind of dull to look at.
Frank Howard asks, is that thing behind you kryptonite? And San answers, no, it's a sentient rock from Star Trek.
It's not sentient. There's a scene in one of the early Star Treks where Sulu shoots a rock with a phaser to keep it warm. So that's what that is. It's just mood lighting now. But yeah, my studio is full of all kinds of weird little items like that.
Yeah, it changes. I've been seeing it change. Okay. Francisco Sanchez said, where does your clear drawing style come from? I see that, well, I recognize influences from Arthur Adams, Kevin Maguire. I don't think I see that because you are from the same generation. So,
at least Arthur and I share one really big influence. My main influence for most of my childhood, which is where my style has kind of always looked not similar, but basically it had this one quality, and that was the clean line thing. That's from Tintin and early French stuff. Tintin and Asterix were the first two comics that I remember really falling for. I read, or I was too young to read actually, but the first comic I ever saw was Fantastic Four #1. But then I lived overseas for a while when I was a child and got European comics given to me. Tintin and Asterix and a couple of others that I don't even remember anymore, but Tintin made a huge impression on me, huge influence. When I was a teenager and first got into superhero comics, the big influence for me was Michael Golden.
Mm-hmm. That's the one I was going to mention when he said influence, and I thought I was going to say, well, I could say the common influence for both of them is Michael Golden.
And both Arthur and I grew up around the same time. We're not that different age-wise, and you could not escape being influenced by John Byrne if you read comics in the 70s and 80s. I mean, it was just, his comics were everywhere. He was prolific. They were the biggest comics, of the day. So there's a lot of that too there. I'm not a major John Byrne fan or anything. Nothing against him. I love those comics when I was a kid, but they didn't speak to me the way when I saw Micronaut by Michael Golden, and then later the Avengers Annual and Doctor Strange 55 just blew my head off. Some of the best. Oh man, wow! I've never seen that before.
That's a gift he gave me like a couple of years ago. But the thing with that, I was going to ask, John Byrne or George Perez?
Byrne.
Because that was the dual question back in the day. Which one was your favorite?
I liked them both. I read Teen Titans and his Avengers, but I like his stuff more. Don't know why.
Amankai Nawalpan, another amazing artist too, says, any memories from Batman Annual from 1990? Best two-face story of all time, in my opinion.
I remember what it felt like I thought, wow, I've finally made it. That was literally my third job in comics. So it felt like they were giving me this huge, huge project with a major character after drawing. I think I did a short story for Secret Origins and then one issue of Justice League Europe, and then boom, this 64-page Batman Annual Two-Face origin story, which, at a time when Batman was the biggest character in comics. So it was amazing, but I was way too young and inexperienced for it. It's like, I would love, my major thoughts on that were, oh my God, what I could do with that now, with that script. I would love to go back and redo that book. It was the best I could do at the time. I'm not putting it down, and for anybody who likes it, that's great. I did as good as I could at the time, but now I feel like, oh man, I could do this so much better. I know what I'm doing now, as opposed to being in the business for a year or less than a year at the time.
Go back to do a remake.
Yeah, it was a fun project. I got to talk to Denny O'Neil on the phone. Had a great time doing it. And, it's been following me around my entire career. There's never been a convention where I didn't sign one of those. So it's been a big deal.
Okay, Shan, I don't know what you mean, sang with I can get a commission, I'm sure. Please explain. I don't know what you're talking about now. Probably it's about something we've mentioned before, but I got lost. Chris Knowles says, Chris, I would love to see you draw a cover on YouTube in real time, even if it takes 10 hours. You want to kill him? No.
But see, that would take 30 hours to upload. That's the biggest drawback, and why I film them sped up, or I speed them up in the editing is because even the ones I speed up that are 8 minutes long take forever to upload to YouTube. But someday,
okay. Sean clarifies cement transformers with the commission. Okay, yes, you can. I can. Antonio Gomez Morillo. I believe Chris is a big fan of the Legion of Superheroes. I still keep the Saturn Girl sketch he did for me in Heroes Madrid in 2000. How does he remember his amazing work on Legionnaires?
My second favorite time in my career.
Mhm.
Working on Legionnaires was the first time I experienced that feeling of being on a team where Jason Pearson was working on the other Legion book at the time. So through him, I met everybody I'm friends with now in comics, pretty much. I met all the other Gaijin guys, Carl Story, who's probably my closest friend in the business, Adam Hughes, Dave Johnson, all these guys I met through
Estelle Fries and others, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and Stell Fries, I can't believe I forgot him. And all these guys have been a huge influence on me, but also they're friends. So it was a really good time in comics. Comics were doing well. Everybody's enthusiastic about it. DC was doing things that I know they don't do anymore. They flew all of us, the entire team of both books, up to New York and wined and dined us and had us meet and plot books in person. So it was like Keith Giffen, Jason Pearson, Tom and Mary, and me. And even the colorist, Tom McCraw, was there. We were all contributing ideas and character designs and stuff. So really, really cool time. And I remember it really fondly. I feel like if I hadn't done Legion, everything else wouldn't have come.
Mhm.
Like everybody knew me from that, who offered me subsequent work. And to this day, people still cite it as something that they remember me doing. But mostly, since I love the Legion, I had a great time doing it. But it also was rewarding in a million other ways, just friendships, career opportunities, getting to work with people I admired, like Keith Giffen. I loved his 80s Legion of Superheroes, and there I was in a room with him, with him sketching while we're talking. I got to watch him do that. I got to watch him plot stories and work with him. So amazing time.
How challenging it was, being so young, having such a huge cast of characters. Because you have to make them different enough to differentiate them between each other, etc. And it's the Legion. It's not. I know there was 2 books, yes, but it's not a small cast.
We had 22 of them. That's just the heroes, because there were. I had to design.
You just said just 22. 22. And see the other artists complaining about having more than 7 Avengers. You know what I mean?
But I did a finished character design for every single one of the characters. I think we worked on that book for several months before we ever drew the first page, before we ever worked on it. It was originally going to be a reboot of the Legion. They weren't going to be a spin-off series or anything like that. It was just going to be a reboot. So a lot of stuff changed, but the one thing that stayed was the costumes. Mm-hmm. So I sat down and just one by one did all 22 characters. Only 1 or 2 even got changed. They were pretty much the first take of all the characters. And I made copies and put them in a notebook. And the entire time I worked on the series, I would just have this notebook, next to me, flip through and look at what I had designed, because, I can keep 5 or 6 characters in mind and get all the costume details right. But when 22, when there were some characters that I very rarely drew, so I had to really refer to my own character designs the entire time I worked on it. But it was a lot of work. It was daunting when I get a script and it would say splash page. The entire team flies into action. I was like, okay, that's going to take a while. That's all that ever was daunting to me. And it was, that's not true. Getting them to fit on the page. If it was a whole team shot, that was hard. A lot easier to do now with resizing stuff on the computer. But back in the old days, it was like, if it didn't work, you had to erase it and start over.
Yeah, but that's always the same thing with the writer. You can have 400 soldiers in the back of the scene, an establishing shot where she also saw the castle, and in the castle you saw the guy with the arrows shooting with bow and arrows to the 400 soldiers. But also you have to show the main character as in a good shot in that panel.
Yeah, I forgot what the joke is. It's like the worst line you could receive as an artist in comics is like the Armada attacks or something like that. 3 words for a writer, but 3 days of work for a comic artist.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Anyway, we just crossed the 2-hour mark,
Holy cow!
and you have a life and a wife to come back to and work, and I'm keeping my family around too.
Okay.
So I think we should call it today, if you're okay with that.
All right. Well, it was good talking. I didn't even realize 2 hours had passed. So.
No, I just saw it. When I'm having fun until I hear, the girl around jumping, like, okay, she's home. So I need to take care. Sorry, guys, for a bit for my family. Just understand that. He has a wife and a life to come back to. So thank you, Chris. Please don't cut because I want to say proper goodbye to you after I cut the live feed.
Okay.
But to all of you, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. If you watch this on the weekend, on Friday, or a nice rest of the day whenever you watch it. To you, Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here. And to all of you, we'll be back on Monday, if everything goes well, with Mr. Peter back. Take care. Good weekend. Out in 3, 2,